What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, there's a ton of anticipation going into this week around the idea of a Nintendo Direct airing, and now we're starting to see some movement behind the scenes with ratings that are happening for one game in particular that we figure will not only be there, but also get dated for this year, and even some rumors kind of going around about what games could be there, with a big RPG making headlines. Again, we'll go over all of that though here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony and a job listing that was made public that sent the internet going crazy because, it's PlayStation Studios and the idea of multi-platform support with Xbox and Nintendo specifically being named. And we have that whole situation around censorship with games being removed, adult-themed games from Steam and itch.io. Well, it appears that gamers have had enough and they're trying to figure out their own ways to push back, and we'll see exactly what they have planned here today. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with Marvel, Tokon, and EVO 2025. That takes place August 1st to the 3rd, and it appears Marvel Tokon will be debuting there, which you can see this over on PlayStation blog, where they say attendees will be able to duke it out with their friends and construct their very own 4-character team from a roster of 6 playable Marvel legends. That includes Captain America, Iron Man, Storm, Star-Lord, Miss Marvel, and Doctor Doom. This makes a ton of sense. Naturally, Sony owns EVO, so it's their big event, really big fighting event. But also, you're going to have a crowd there that should give you some very good feedback as gameplay is happening and people are checking out the game. And you'll probably get a ton of good footage of people who know fighting games, are able to show it off in a good way. So yeah, I would expect to see all kinds of cool gameplay coming out from there and a ton of impressions. So keep your eyes out. Again, EVO happening later on this week, starting on August 1st. Also, it appears some other Xbox games that are coming up in the not too distant future could also be releasing on the PS5, which probably isn't news to most people at this point because we've already seen that happen over and over and over again. However, this was a report that was posted by MP First, where they say Gears of War E-Day and State of Decay 3 are coming to PS5. Now, these appear to be pulled from different resumes or job listings. For example, one being Gears of War E-Day, with platforms being shown as PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and then something similar for State of Decay 3, that being a resume. So again, we know where Microsoft is sitting right now with multi-platform support. They're completely on board, it feels like, and they're seeing some pretty good success with things like Forza Horizon 5, that currently being the best-selling game on the PlayStation 5 this year. So it's like all systems go. Anything coming up now with even like Gears of War E-Day, I mean, Gears of War Reloaded, that's going to the PlayStation 5 in August. So yeah, it's kind of where they're starting with Gears, and then here comes E-Day, in their mind, hey, let's just go ahead and put it on PS5, day one release. That would be my expectation, and this one I'd be surprised if Microsoft didn't start doing that just consistently going forward with just about every release. Oh, and it does appear that Dying Light the Beast has been delayed, but before you get too concerned, it's not like a massive delay. However, it's still pushing it back about a month, which you can see this. They posted this over on their website, where they say, it's always been our goal to make Dying Light the Beast the best Dying Light game we've ever released. To honor this promise, we've made the decision to move the release date to September 19th, 2025 to allow for extra polishing work. Originally, it was supposed to release August 21st, so we were like 4 weeks out or so, and there's giving it another month, as they mentioned, to polish, which, I mean, look, Dying Light the Beast, they said, started out as a smaller game and just kind of grown in terms of scope and ideas and other parts of it to where it's a much larger game than they originally anticipated. So if they have to push it back a month for the standalone release just to be better in terms of polish on day one, I prefer that as opposed to you buy a game, it's busted, and then you have to wait a month for it to be fixed. I can hang on and wait. There's enough stuff to play, and Dying Light, like I like the first one. The second one I really enjoyed, so I am looking forward to Dying Light the Beast, and I'd rather it release in good condition for the most part, as opposed to it needing an extra month to fix it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this Nintendo Direct that honestly could be announced at any moment. I was thinking it could be announced today, or I guess tomorrow, as Nintendo sometimes will do that, where, I mean, they've done it as soon as like 12 hours before. So I would like to think that Nintendo could give us a day or so. And if they announce it today for Wednesday, great. Tuesday, sure. But really, we're just expecting something for July. And it's sort of the last week of July at this time, so any point now we should have it announced. But we are starting to see some movement now, seemingly in preparation of release dates being revealed. We've already talked about The Legend of Zelda Age of Imprisonment getting a certification in Brazil, once again kind of setting up the idea that it would be at this Direct with a release date, since it is set up for 2025 or like wintertime. Well, now it looks like Metroid Prime 4 has been rated. This we can see over on the Korean ratings board. And I mean, yeah, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Switch 2 edition. Remember, people are kind of like forgetting because the Switch 2 is out and people are picking it up and enjoying it. It is a Switch 1 game that has been switched to enhanced. Like, it has a Switch 2 edition as they show here with all kinds of better visual features and higher frame rates, right? Mouse controls. But I mean, it describes it as you'd expect, with Samus Aran getting a call out, Galactic Federation Research Facility after all that being translated over. And it seems to be getting a rating of for ages 12 and up. So I would expect it to have the teen rating and stuff for the ESRB. But since we're seeing this, naturally people are, of course, expecting there to be some kind of release date at the Nintendo Direct. And just to go a bit further here, VGC did report on the Metroid Prime 4, that getting this rating, and they said, according to reports, Nintendo is planning to hold a Nintendo Direct stream imminently, which matches with what VGC has heard from sources. So just a bit more backing there from what we've heard from like Nate the Hate and Wood, Beat 'em Ups, kind of just all pointing at July. And then we do have one person from Reset Era who's been pretty good about stuff coming out of Sega and Atlas. They seem to be hinting towards Persona 3 Reload being at the Nintendo Direct, which any of these games, Atlas, a big one, clearly Sega, I mean, it wouldn't be shocking. And this is probably this would be one of the safest guesses. It's like, okay, pick an RPG out of Japan. There's a good chance you'll be right at some point in time that it would be on the Switch 2. And with Persona 3 Reload being like the last real Persona game, I guess, that's come out, yeah, it makes sense that they would go ahead and move that over. And eventually, I'm sure, whenever they're ready to show Persona 6, that most likely will have a Switch 2 logo alongside of it as well. So now, kind of a waiting game. People are very excited and hyped up, waiting to see what Nintendo has in store to close out the rest of this year. Maybe a few hints towards things further in the future, but right now they have 3 big releases they need to get dates for. That being Metroid Prime 4, Legend of Zelda Age of Imprisonment, and Kirby Air Riders. They start setting that up alongside of Pokemon Legends EA. They have a pretty good 4 to 5 month run as they head into the holiday season, and then, of course, trying to push a ton more Switch 2 systems. So yes, expect Metroid Prime 4 there, and while we're on the topic of it here being rated, I'm going to put the guess in that Metroid Prime 4 is releasing, I'm going to say, at the beginning of November. Yeah, unfortunate, I know, but that's just kind of how I'm seeing it, as I feel like Nintendo still wants to get 2 and 3 out there beforehand, and Metroid Prime 4 taking longer to get out just seems like a way for Nintendo to spite me one last time with this release. This is a lot of fun to look back on the days of blissful ignorance when they announced it in 2017 with the logo, how excited we are that we'd probably be playing it in the next couple of years, and well, here we are 8 years later. Next up, let's talk about Sony and this job listing that really set the internet off. I mean, it's been wild stuff all over social media with reactions and arguments and speculation around the idea of Sony releasing PlayStation Studio games on a console that's not PlayStation. And this is compounded, of course, on the fact that Helldivers 2 is going to the Xbox, which I think is something that's really thrown people off, because in their mind, it doesn't necessarily make sense for Sony to do that if people aren't buying games on the Xbox, unless they are. Again, that's where people are kind of getting thrown off right now. But this was a job listing that was spotted and then shared all over the internet, where we can see the job responsibilities and descriptions. It says, reporting to the Vice President, Commercial Management as Senior Director of Multiplatform and Account Management, you will play a critical leadership role in shaping and executing the global commercial strategy for PlayStation Studio software titles across all digital platforms beyond PlayStation hardware, including Steam, Epic Game Store, Xbox, Nintendo, and mobile. This role is accountable for optimizing title profitability, ensuring cross-functional alignment, and leading high-performing team-focused on multi-platform expansion, mid-range commercial planning, and platform partner management. And to me, it's laid out there completely. Yes, Sony, as we're seeing with something like Helldivers 2 on the Xbox, and we've seen with Lego Horizon on the Switch, yeah, they're exploring other avenues as to who else can they sell these games to and just generate more and more revenue. And that's kind of the situation that Sony is in currently, since while the PlayStation 5 selling well, yes, it is kind of sitting there alongside the PS4, as in the console market isn't necessarily growing. So as we've seen, they're looking to PC, which seems to be doing pretty well for them, as they mentioned that it's kind of almost found money for them. Yes, they have to port it over, so it's not free, but it's not like developing an entirely new game to then just sell to the PlayStation 5 user base. They take games that are already existing, even years old, move it over to the PC, and they get money. It seems to be working for them, and I say that because they keep doing it. So now maybe them setting their sights on not only Xbox, but also Nintendo, which I know people are really focused on Xbox right now because it's very confusing, since there's been a serious campaign going around that no one's buying games on the Xbox, but then Sony is like moving games to it. So it's not necessarily adding up in people's mind. But the Nintendo, I think, is a big one, okay? So the Switch 2 clearly is already taking over Japan. But it's just, we see the sales charts from time to time, and it's selling a ton. I mean, it's the fastest selling system already in Japan, and it's just getting started. So to me, Sony realizes that if they start putting their games even on Switch 2 that are years and years old, there's probably plenty of people just in Japan that might give the games a look because they don't have a PS5. They have a Switch 2, again, as we get years and years into the generation. So maybe they will check out Horizon now. Like maybe Days Gone. These are things that I'm sure they've kicked around, but the idea comes down to profitability and the potential there. As in, if a game comes off of PlayStation and it's no longer tied to that brand or that console specifically, outside of PC, we're just talking about like the three major console platform holders, would that then in turn diminish profitability going forward, in the sense that people aren't coming into your ecosystem for the long run? So Spider-Man 2018 is a game that they have done a remastered for in the PS5, but it is years and years old, and it feels like you've sold through as many copies as you're really going to. So with moving that over to Xbox or Switch 2, we'll just say, because that is a big name franchise series with Spider-Man, just across the board, the character, everything, right? The trademark, likeness, everything. Would that bring in a bunch of money? Probably. But would that then also make people think, I don't need to get a PlayStation 6 for Spider-Man 4 because it'll show up on the platform? These are the things they're weighing right now, and that's why they have a job that starts at $250,000 with a range of up to like $360,000. Because they need them to be good at their job, and they don't have these job listings for people who aren't then going to come in and do that job. So nothing has happened yet, okay? They have not moved over a big single player franchise at this time, like a God of War or a Ratchet and Clank, or we'll say a Spider-Man, to Xbox or Nintendo platforms. So it is still speculation, theoretical, but this job listing certainly paints a picture, and it's one that I think Sony will really start to go down here as we get further and further, not only to the back end of this generation, but to start up the next generation as they work to build that install size all over again. Maybe looking towards where the Switch 2 is, sitting at 60 to 80 million at that time in terms of install size. Oh, we can get some money in that way, just to help kind of bolster the bottom line as we work to sell more and more PS6 systems. So interesting times ahead right now for just consoles. Console exclusivity is feeling more and more like it's becoming a thing of the past, unless you're Nintendo, in which case they'd probably rather go out of business than put Mario anywhere else. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the situation around games, adult-themed games, being delisted from Steam and itch.io, which we've already discussed what happened there with Steam and Valve, where payment processors came in, leaned on them, and then all of a sudden, guidelines were updated overnight, and then a bunch of games were delisted. Just like that. It shows really the power of these payment processors, specifically Visa and Mastercard. Well, that's now extended beyond just Valve and Steam to itch.io, which they had this entire blog post that they had to really outline what was happening, because it turns out thousands of games were delisted, and some people were concerned because it almost seemed like some of these games were being pulled out of their digital library, but then that was refuted, and it wasn't apparently the case. And it does feel like a lot of this stuff happened overnight at the drop of a hat. go figure, payment processors really do have that kind of power. Well, we can see this over on itch.io, where they say recently we came under scrutiny from our payment processors regarding the nature of some content hosted on itch.io due to a game titled No Mercy, which was temporarily available on itch.io before being banned back in April. The organization Collective Shout launched a campaign against Steam and itch.io directing concerns to our payment processors about the nature of certain content found on both platforms. So naturally, itch.io did respond by just delisting this stuff at like snap of a finger, it's all gone. And people are, of course, annoyed at itch.io, but like they're not going to exist if they're not bringing in money. And again, you have to really look back at what caused this. Okay, so you can say Collective Shout, but to me, again, it really comes back to how much power payment processors have. And it seems like gamers have sort of honed in on this. So I do think organizations like Collective Shout or even itch.io just basically folding to this very quickly are sort of distractions in this case. And the root of the problem here are the payment processors and how much power they have. So I noticed this was popping up as one person over on the Steam subreddit mentioned that they did send a message to Visa. And they got something back that was the most generalized response that, let's be real, was probably written by like a chatbot or something from Visa. I'd be shocked if a human even read the message and responded. However, that has not stopped people from the subreddit now to put together like templates where people can insert some information like name or anything like that, and then just send it off to them. So this post over on the subreddit's garnered over 22,000 upvotes, and it seems like a lot of people are kind of bombarding Visa and then Mastercard with these messages that, I mean, look very formal and respectful and stuff, but just saying, hey, stop moderating games just because for some reason you feel the need to, since I guess Collective Shout got a hold of them. Well, to go a bit further, there is a petition that has been launched on change.org. And I'm not here to tell you that these petitions generally do much, because they usually don't. I mean, how many times do we go over petitions where it's like, get this Nintendo game on Xbox, or like what, you know what I mean? It's usually some like worthless calls or something. It's like, okay. But here, this actually makes sense. Okay, it's just, hey, tell Mastercard, Visa, and apparently again, just Mastercard and Visa, stop controlling what we can watch, read, or play. And at this time, it has over 144,000 signatures, with at least the decision makers being pointed out with like Federal Trade Commission. And that's what it's going to come down to. This is a feeling of almost helplessness for a lot of people, because a lot of people who are writing in and doing these petitions and signing them have a Visa or MasterCard in their wallet, because that's just kind of what you do when you have a bank account. Like, you probably are attached to them one way or the other, and they know that. So they really don't have to do a lot from their angle, because they're not really going to lose most people, like most customers. They do control payment processing basically globally at that point, at least the large majority of it. So yes, you do have to go to regulators for them to then put a spotlight on these payment processors. And that's just kind of where we are. So at least coming together and trying to sign a petition to show how many people legitimately care about this, that is kind of what you're left with at this point. And I mean, look at Stop Killing Games. It has at least worked there when it comes to games, just stop them being killed off, basically. But here, this does become a more serious thing that I think extends well beyond even just games, as, again, this comes back to just payment processors having quite a bit of control across the board completely. Entertainment, yes, but just about everything. So yeah, I just want to point that out, right, as kind of what solutions gamers are trying to find here with a situation that is quite difficult. I mean, they're really scaling Mount Everest on this one, but I'll have a lot of this stuff linked down below in the sources so you can check it out a bit more for yourself. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, are you planning to pick up Final Fantasy VII Remake on Switch 2 or Xbox? 73% say no, but 27% say yes. I'm interested to see how things go with some of these later ports to Xbox and Switch 2. I know the Switch 2, it has that convenience factor of it being a hybrid device, and I'm sure many people they're just curious how the game is going to look and run on that system, whether it's in portable play or docked mode. Then also on the Xbox, it's probably going to be very similar to the PS5, just across the board. So I'm curious, because these games are, I mean, they're most likely going to be full price, especially on the Switch 2. It definitely will be. But is it going to be game key card? Is it going to be just a digital download? Will they get the whole thing on like the card itself? I would be shocked if they did. But who knows? At this rate, I believe the game itself integrate is quite large in terms of file size. So I'm thinking either game keycard or just digital only on the Switch 2, and certainly digital only at this point on the Xbox. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Bashful, who says, M64 for $200 is not a pretty reasonable price. Consider you can find N64s in good condition for right around that with multiple controllers, sometimes less. You can emulate it for free too. There's no legitimate reason someone would want to buy the new one over either of those options. Maybe I'm missing something important, but it seems like a bad deal. If it were $100, then I suppose you could say pretty reasonable because it makes it more accessible, as well as being an unused console to play your old game. So the bottom line here is, especially now more than ever, retro gaming is expensive. That's just it. It's just an expensive hobby to really dive into. Now, you talk about the N64 being around that. So with that in mind, hooking it up to a flat screen TV is going to be difficult. You could use those terrible cables off of Amazon, I guess. But if you really want it to look halfway decent, you're going to spend $80 to $100, maybe more, on just a basic plug-in adapter on the back that converts it over to HDMI with some form of quality. Again, those cables on Amazon look terrible, just outright. But for this, I know emulation is always, just emulate it. That's fine. There are a lot of people who would like to also use their legitimate cartridges, and the idea of there just being a new age N64, yes, it is a lot of nostalgia that's going to sell it, but also the convenience factor and the ability to use your own controllers that you have now, as well as your cartridges on a system that is going to be more or less plug and play. Emulation works, not necessarily always plug and play. Sometimes you got to mess around with settings, do some other things, and people aren't necessarily as interested. There's a novelty factor there, but also pretty big convenience factor there as well for something like the M64 or the Analog 3D. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to see more about that Switch 2 Pro controller as I gave my thoughts on it and did a full teardown on it. I'll leave that right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.